when did you first start your coin collecting journey, and what got you into coin collecting?
Yeah, I think like a lot of other Canadian coin collectors, what first kind of drew me in were the commemorative issues in circulation. I had an uncle who was really big on coin roll hunting, and every time we'd go up to the family cottage, family reunion, he'd be over in the corner cracking open rolls, going through them. So I think that's kind of where my interest stemmed.
Your uncle was coin roll hunting at family reunions?
Yes, he was.
That's a level of commitment right there.
Yeah, you gotta get the rolls in, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that's definitely where the interest stemmed, and through that, every Christmas, birthdays, the newest RCM 20 for 20 or a nice old silver dollar was what I'd expect to get from him. And through that, he kind of taught me the ropes, pull out pennies before 1999, pull out your nickel, set it aside for a rainy day. And through that, like everybody else, there I was going through my change, going through my piggy banks, trying to find anything of interest, really.
All right. Okay, another question that I wanted to ask someone that is a little bit deeper into the coin world is, what would you actually classify makes a coin rare and valuable? Like, what is it that people are looking for that they're willing to pay premiums for on different levels? Like, let's say for a low-grade coin, what are things you can look for? And then also for high-grade examples, if that makes sense.
Right. When I think about rarity, you kind of got to look at it from two different angles. There's absolute rarity, which is when you're looking at coins with basically no examples that survived. And then there's conditional rarities, something like the 1944 penny, which you can't find pretty much above MS65.
Yep.
But in circulated condition, you can find...
So let's just touch on that briefly, because I have mentioned it in some of my videos and coin roll hunts. Some of the World War II pennies, particularly the 1944, why is it that not many high-grade examples of that penny survived?
Well, you have to think about the situation in the mint when they were producing them. The issue you'll find with a lot of 1944s is they're struck poorly, they have porous surfaces, and generally they don't hit that mark of a gem grade coin, even if the surfaces are pristine.
Okay.
So that's the issue you run into.
So it's not necessarily like a circulation issue, like people were using them more, as much as they came out of the mint with flaws and errors that year that don't let them attribute as high on the scale.
Exactly. The quality overall of that issue in general was lower than, say, for example, a 1947 Maple Leaf, which you can find in gem very, very easily.
So is there something on the opposite end of that, like certain years that are known for having higher strike qualities, or like specimen or proof strikes that are known for being extra beautiful?
Yeah, one of the best places to kind of look for coins that almost always are in nice condition are proof-like sets. The silver proof-likes 1967 and prior, generally straight from the plyo film, are going to be in that 65 to 66 range. So that's where you're going to expect to see higher grades a little more frequently, and there are some exceptions. I've had proof-like sets that have had fingerprints from the mint. I've had proof-like sets that have been scratched in the plyo film. So not always, but in general, if you have an original sealed proof-like set, you're around that 65, 66 range most times.
When it comes to older silver proof sets, I know for some modern proof sets that there can actually be proof sets that can be attributed with errors, like certain coins are flipped the wrong way and stuff. Are there older proof sets that have those kind of attributions, or?
There's a few, but it's all in the same sort of, classification. One coin's flipped the other way. The 1967, sometimes you'll see the dollar has a slight rotation, as do some of the other coins. And in really rarer examples, there's like the 1964 missing dot.
Okay.
People will look for that, and they do still exist. They're out there. You can definitely cherry pick them from dealers still.
The best chance usually for that kind of stuff at this point, I would guess, is like sealed boxes, where you get like, 5 sets in a sealed box, or what would be your suggestion?
The problem with the sealed boxes is 9 times out of 10, if you're buying them, they're still sealed. When you open them, they're all going to be the same type of set. They're all going to be struck consecutively. They all would have been produced near the same time. So it's either a big winner, and sometimes that does happen for sure, but 9 times out of 10, they're all just average condition, proof-like sets, nothing too spectacular.
Does it ever happen where you break open one of these boxes and they're all just like horribly toned and they all just look ugly, or are they usually pretty good looking, or like how does it go?
They're going to be nice. It's just a question of, are they all just what you expect to see from a proof-like set, or do they maybe have exceptional cameo that would kind of set them apart from the masses?
What is it that actually causes cameo? It's like a liquid or something, like it's not grease, but it's like some extra something that's causing the process to happen. like when I was making the video, it was like I don't know if there's like something on the dies or like something that, and then it like slowly wears off, and as it wears off, the cameo fades or something like that. Like, what is that? What? How does that affect the cameo process?
Essentially, when the Mint was producing dies for proof-like sets, for proof sets later on, they'd finish the dies by acid etching the surface,
Yes.
and that acid etch would kind of create these microscopic, divots and valleys that create that frosted appearance. It traps light, deflects it, and then they polish off the background.
Okay.
So you're going to have these devices that have this acid etched, super frosted white kind of. It's the same thing as frosted glass, right?
Okay.
They're creating this surface that bounces light off and then polishing the background to have a nice deep mirror finish.
So when a cameo occurs on a circulation or a business strike, it's the same thing, but I'm guessing it's only for the first couple that they strike, and then it wears off very quickly. So
similar process. I can't speak to if they would have acid etched the business dies, but definitely when they were preparing the dies after they get to that final stage of doing the final polish, whatever happened beforehand may have caused that coin to have a little bit of cameo contrast. And yeah, the first maybe 100,000 coins or something that are struck off those dies have a little bit of a cameo appearance.
So it's more common to have a cameo on a proof like or a specimen coin than a business strike usually?
Exactly. When we're talking about specimens, it kind of depends the era.
Okay.
But proof likes, especially the later years, 62 onward, they were trying to get that frosted appearance. And with that, a lot of the times you will expect to see a little bit of cameo, but those really deep contrast examples are pretty few and far between.
I got you. On eBay, I noticed once, I don't know if it was a 1944 or 1945 World War II V-nickel, and it had an ultra-heavy cameo, and I think it was selling for like $1,200 or $1,500 or something like that.
Yeah.
So if you look up like the MS-65 book value, it's like anywhere from $50 to $100 depending on the day. But when you add the ultra-heavy cameo designation, it increases the value like tenfold. So that's an absolute crazy price jump.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what is more desirable for a collector like you? Would you rather have an SP65 1945 V nickel, or would you rather have something that's super one of a kind, kind of like an MS65 ultra heavy cameo 1945 nickel? What's more appealing to an experienced collector?
With that sort of thing, it kind of goes back to that rarity conversation where there's the absolute rarity and then there is, conditional rarity. When you think about a 45 nickel with ultra heavy cameo as a business strike, it might be one of a kind. There might be 10 more out there. Yeah. Certainly something that you don't see every day. I tend to prefer the absolute rarity for my own collection. I like looking for pieces that maybe only had 100, 150 made. And so through that lens, I'd probably go the specimen route. Especially that date in particular is a really good date. But even on a commoner issue, unless it's something that has that mix of absurd quality as well as the cameo contrast, I'd probably go away from the conditional rarity and try to get something that itself just doesn't exist.
Gotcha. One thing I definitely wanted to touch on in this interview was the process of getting your coins graded here in Canada. It can be very complicated. There's a lot of different options out there. There's Canadian companies, and then there's some very well-known US companies. So I was wondering if you could just weigh in and tell us some of the pros and cons to sending your coin to be graded at ICCS in Toronto. That's the budget option. And what pieces you might want to send to PCGS or NGC.
Yeah, as you mentioned, ICCS obviously has a lower price point in general. And with that in mind, a lot of Canadian dealers tend to prefer it just because it's easier to send a volume of coins there without having to pay $40, $50 a coin. I will say, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of their holders. That dual layer plastic I find makes it somewhat difficult to appreciate the coin that's encapsulated.
Do you think it's possible that the coins have a higher chance of getting damaged than the ICCS holders as well?
100%. On quite a few occasions now, I've bought coins in usually older generation ICCS holders where that inner flip, the inert PVC free flip, is cracked.
Oh, yeah.
Leaving the coin exposed to that soft PVC plastic that is holding everything together. And so through that lens, it makes you wonder what happens if you put your coin away in ICCS for 20, 30 years.
Yep. Just the fact too, I have at times had 10, 15, 20 ICCS coins, and if you're stacking them all on top of each other, they're constantly rubbing against each other. And like, there's probably better. It might not be the most intelligent way for me to store them, but I'm guessing that it's a lot more practical to have them in hard plastic. Like, those things are not getting damaged. You got to take a screwdriver and stab them to holy heck to be able to do any damage to them. Or, you know, some people will break them open with what was it you mentioned? Tile nippers. And,
Exactly.
but for the most part, ICCS, they just aren't nearly as durable. And when they stand the test of time? Who knows? But I'm sure. When did ICCS start? When was the company actually founded? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, it was around 1985, I want to say, 1985, 1986.
Okay.
You know, that being said, as much as, in my opinion, I wouldn't put a coin away for a long time in an ICCS holder, for purely grading so that it's easier to transact on the market, I would say ICCS is definitely a good option. You know, if you have something that's a little bit higher end, you don't necessarily want to maybe sell yourself short or sell it for too much money, definitely a good option. Send it to ICCS, only $13 a coin. There's a reason dealers like it so much.
Yeah.
But compared to PCGS and NGC, the price point at almost 4 times as much per coin, it's definitely a little bit hard to justify, but...
So what are the exact price cost minimum for a PCGS or an NGC submission? Like, if I wanted to send a coin, what is the minimum cost that I'm going to pay today?
So I don't use NGC much. I personally don't like their Canadian grading standards too much, so I've avoided sending to them. With PCGS, the regular grading tier, which will cover you up to $2,500 US in case something happens to your coin, that costs it's $38 American, and that's not including, you know, you got to ship it to the States. They charge you return shipping.
So you're talking $60 to $75 in cost easily just to ship. So what do you find is, like, what does a coin have to be worth to validate you actually sending it to PCGS? What is the minimum book value of a coin that you will send in to actually make sure that you receive a profit from it?
Well, if you want to send to PCGS, I'd either say make sure that's a coin you want to keep in your own collection, because I will say PCGS slabs do make it a lot easier to appreciate the coin, handle it as much as you want without fear of damaging it or hurting its value in the future. Or you want something that's maybe $100, $150 minimum, and you can send it in the economy tier where you get it in that slab. It's going to take you a couple extra months compared to the regular tier.
Yep.
But if you're not at that price point and you are sending it in because you want to sell it eventually, if it's anything less than $100, 9 times out of 10, it's easier to just sell it raw or sell it in an ICCS flip for sure.
Well, that's the hard answer right there. A lot of people, they like to send their commemorative Canadian stuff in. They like to send their new maples in, but honestly, I don't think it's really worth it to send that kind of stuff in. It's usually just about the same price to get the coin graded as you pay for it, and it doesn't have that much of a numismatic premium, so I don't understand it. I guess there's a market for it, but you just heard the truth from this guy right here.